Good evening. Just wanted to ask the question. Have you ever wondered what are the best ways to communicate with a loved one that has dementia? What do you say? What do you don't say? Do you bring them back to reality? Do you try and correct them, or you support them in their reality? What are some tips and strategies for to be able to have successful communication with your loved ones that have dementia? So that's what Tuesday Tips tonight is going to be about. My name is Pam Dunwald. I am one of your nurse advocates from Your Nurse Advocates Consulting, and that's the topic for this evening's Tuesday Tips. So let's go ahead and let's just jump in. I'm going to share some tips, strategies, and also share some stories of experiences where I could demonstrate some of the things that we're going to talk about. So just to get started with kind of the laundry list to begin with, just some basic communication tips is you want to use simple and clear language. Approach them from the front. A lot of people with Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia can get really paranoid and they're always suspicious. So you always want to be, approaching them from the front, being, calm, a patient tone. Use pictures, gestures, or objects sometimes to help and try and convey your message, and limit their choices. So, for example, sometimes they can get overwhelmed with, Mom, choose the outfit that you'd like to wear today. We're going to a doctor appointment. Instead, maybe lay out two things and say, Mom, which outfit would you like to wear today to the doctor's office, this one or this one? And so when we limit their choices and prevent them from being so overwhelmed, then that can go a long way in making that conversation go a little better. So let's start with our first story for this evening. My first experience with Alzheimer's disease was with my grandpa. My grandpa was in a nursing home. He had Parkinson's disease and also Alzheimer's disease. And I was a new nurse. I was a brand new nurse. And so he was living at a nursing home. My mom was a CNA. She worked there full time. And so he was there where at the nursing home where she worked. And we brought him home for Easter dinner. And the dinner went fine. I'm the oldest of five. So I had four younger brothers and sisters that were there, my dad, my mom. And so, I had a couple of children, so he saw his grandkids. So I think he had a really good time. Well, then it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we knew that they started getting the residents ready for bed around 7 or so. So we decided that it was time to take Grandpa back to the nursing home. So I also volunteered to take him back. And so we got outside, went to the car, and my mom opened the passenger car for him, and he would not get in. He looked at me and he had the most fearful look on his face. And he looked right at me and he said, "You're a spy. You're going to kidnap me. I am not getting in this car." And so, my mom looked at me and she's like, "Well, what do we do?" And so I had known from, some of my training in nursing school that, their reality is their reality. I could tell him till I'm blue in the face that I'm his granddaughter. I'm not a spy. I love him. I'm going to take him back. There was no way he was going to believe that, because his reality at the moment is real. Just like you and I are, I'm sharing this information with you today. They believe that whatever their reality they're in at that moment is real. So I said, okay. So my mom said, "Oh, that's okay, Dad. You don't need to get in the car. Let's go back in the house." So we went back in the house. I went in another room for a little while, just let them visit. And we tried again 30 minutes later, and everything was fine. He didn't remember any of that. He got right in the car with me. We had a pleasant ride back to the 20-minute ride back to the nursing home, and everything was fine. So patience can go a long way when you're, dealing with loved ones with dementia. So the next thing we'll talk about is some things you can do during the conversation. So you want to be attentive to their nonverbal clues. For example, facial expressions. Is their body tensing up? Are they clenching their hands? Do they seem relaxed? I think of that. I have horses, and I know this is kind of a crazy analogy, but before a horse will kick you, they're going to give you some warnings. And same thing when you're working with people with dementia, look for those early warning signs. So like, for example, a horse, the first thing the horse will pin his ears back, start to tilt those ears back. And when they lay their ears back on their neck, they're saying, okay, there's your warning number one. And then another warning sign that the horses can give is to twitch or swish their tail. So they'll twitch that tail at you and swish that tail at you and say, okay, here's warning number 3. And they may lift up a leg. Your warning, or I'm sorry, warning number 2 was to switch the tail. Warning number 3 could mean they're cocking they're cocking one leg, they're lifting one leg. They're saying, okay, this is getting serious. And if the other horse still doesn't move or do whatever they need them to do, then they're going to let go of the kick. So same thing with people is, you're going to see before they blow or before you have a behavioral issue, you're going to see them ramping up. You're going to see some warning signs or some cues. And so here's another story that will illustrate that. We had one of our early clients and we've talked about Mrs. D a lot of different times. So you've been following us for a while. You've heard some of these stories because her story is just so unique, because she traveled through all the 7 stages of Alzheimer's disease in a short 9-month period. And a lot of times people take years to go through that. And so she experienced every stage to the fullest. And we had every complication and issue imaginable. And so she loved ice cream. So her granddaughter and us, we took her to an old-fashioned ice cream parlor here in our area. And we walked through the line. She walked through the line just fine. We got the ice cream that she wanted. Everything seemed really fine. We sat down and she started to eat her ice cream. And she said very calmly, she says, "There's no nuts on my ice cream." And the granddaughter said, "Well, that's okay, Grandma. You didn't mention anything, and I didn't think to ask, about nuts. We'll get some nuts next time when we go for ice cream." Then she said a little bit firmer, "I would like some nuts on my ice cream." And then the granddaughter says, "It's okay, Grandma. We'll get it next time." And I said, I'm watching her, and I said to the granddaughter, I says, let's go get her some nuts. Ask if they'll put some nuts in a cup. I don't care what it costs. Let's get her some nuts. Because then, as Julia says, well, okay, then she started getting stern, Mrs. D, and she kind of stomped her foot and she says, "I want some nuts for my ice cream." So her granddaughter got up and went and got her the nuts, brought the nuts back. I mean, she was tense. She was wringing her hands. Her granddaughter came back with the nuts, put the nuts on her ice cream, and it was like someone just turned off the switch. She was very pleasant, smiling, happy, eating her ice cream with her nuts. So again, this is, during that conversation, this is, to watch their body language and look for, verbal cues. Repeat information as necessary. If they don't understand the first time, repeat it again, but use the same wording. Every time we throw it at them in a different way, which would normally what we would do with someone is if they don't understand how we explained it to them the first time, we try and reword it and share it in another way that maybe they would make sense to them. But with someone with dementia, we would want to make sure that we're using the same language. Sometimes they just need more time to process. Sometimes during conversations, when you're encourage reminiscing, ask them to talk about things in the past or a memory. Long-term memories are very something that they can recall. With Mrs. D, it was hard because she kept one of the challenges that we had, and during that whole 9 months, we never realized what it was. But during those 9 months, she kept insisting, "I want to go home. I want to go home." We showed her several pictures. We took, of their old home, the home when she grew up, and none of them were her home. And she kept saying she wants to go home, and we didn't really know where home was. So that was very difficult and frustrating for everybody because we couldn't figure out which home that she might have been talking about. So that is another example. I want to say, during a conversation, one more example. Actually, someone, I don't know who shared this with me. I think it was one of our community members in our forum had shared a TikTok video about a gal whose mom has dementia, and it was really excellent and spot on. This gal was she went out for a walk, and her daughter had caught up with her because she'd left the house and started walking. And she says, "Mom, where are you going?" And they were on the East Coast. She says, "Well, I'm walking to California." And the daughter says, "Oh, that's really nice, that you're walking all the way to California." "Yep, I'm walking to California, and I'm not going to stop until I get there." And rather than to tell her, Mom, do you know California is all the way across the country? Do you know how many days, weeks, whatever it would take you to walk there? You can't walk to California. Instead of saying that, which would be confrontational, again, because they really believed that they could walk to California. I mean, she felt that, it could have been just around the block as far as she was concerned. In her mind, she was able to do it easily. And so the daughter got very creative and she says, Mom, is it all right if I walk with you? Oh, sure, I'd like the company. Go ahead and walk with me. They walk for a little bit, and then she says, Mom, if we're going to be walking to California, this is the clothes on our back. This is all we have. Do you think it might be a good idea for us to go back to the house and pack a few things so that we're really ready to walk to California? And her mom paused, and after a minute, or she says, that's really a good idea. Let's go home and let's pack. So she was able to turn her around and they walked back home. By the time they walked back home, the conversation had changed and she was no longer going to walk to California. So, I thought that was really, really a super excellent demonstration of how you can talk someone through something like that during the conversation. So I wish I have it in our forum. I shared that video. So if you're not a member of our forum, this is a good reason to join our private Facebook group. It's speaking out on the care of your aging parents. And a lot of times, these resources, some of the things that I find, I'll go ahead and I'll post that in our community. And also, if you are seeing this live on our Facebook, you might be able to, I think I did post that on our Facebook page as well. So the last thing I wanted to talk about as we wrap up is supporting them emotionally. One of the things, like I said, their reality is real. So Mrs. D, let's go back to her one last time. And I got a call at midnight one night, and it was the overnight caregiver. And she's on the phone with me. It's midnight. She's calling, you got to come. Ow, ow, ow. Get over here right now. Ow, ow, ow. Please hurry. Ow, ow. Well, Mrs. D was hitting her with her cane, and she was scared to death. This was a new caregiver, and it was an agency caregiver. So my first instinct, I was concerned that this caregiver really didn't know how to handle or manage dementia clients. And so I said, okay, I'll be there. And so immediately, when they're afraid of something, and she was afraid of this caregiver was new. She didn't recognize her. She didn't know her. And she felt threatened. She felt that she was threatened. So her way of protecting herself was swinging her cane at her. And I'm not condoning that. I'm not saying that's right. What I'm saying is she actually felt that afraid, that she felt that she needed to protect herself with that cane. So it wasn't out of anger that she was trying to hit this person. It was out of fear for her life, fear that she was going to get hurt. And so again, their reality is their reality. And so sometimes you can't. So if they're saying, oh, like Mrs. D would say, her husband would be sitting at the kitchen table and she would say, better watch out for that guy. And she'd look out of the corner of her eye, better watch out for that guy. He might kill somebody. I'm really afraid of that guy. I mean, it tore him up. It hurt him so bad, but you can't tell her, Mrs. D, that's your husband. He wouldn't hurt you for the world. He loves you very much. She's not going to believe that because that's not her reality right at that moment. So instead of trying to talk her out of being afraid, what you've got to do to support them when they're in that situation is to make sure, address that fear. So what I said, what, Mrs. D, that gentleman, we're here to take care of you. We're here to make sure nothing hurts you or nothing happens to you. So do you believe that if we're here with you, that you're safe? And she would say, yes, I feel that I'm safe. And worst case scenario, if we would read, she had a very strong Christian faith. And so one of the things that helped her would be to read Psalms in the Bible. So when things got really worked up and we were having trouble kind of, bringing her back down, I'd take her in the room, or her granddaughter would take her in her room, and we'd sit down and we'd find a psalm. We'd ask her, what psalm in the Bible would you like us to read from? And she would tell us, and it would settle her right down. And oftentimes this was a great technique in the middle of the night when she woke up, she's agitated. it calmed her down and she was ready to go back to sleep. So these are some tips and strategies that you could use when you're communicating with dementia patients or dementia clients, dementia loved ones. And all of this is again, we're talking about looking at ways that we can support caregivers of aging loved ones with dementia or just with other chronic illnesses. And so this is leading up to our 30-day boot camp that's coming up in July. So we're real excited about that, helping you build a care team on a budget, so to speak, and trying to find some volunteers and some other resources to supplement the care and to help give you a break and help give you some time for some self-care. And we'll leave the details for that in the video notes. But thanks for joining us for another Tuesday Tips. Again, my name is Pam Dunwald with Your Nurse Advocates from Your Nurse Advocates Consulting, and we'll see you back here for next Tuesday Tips. Take care.